What's up, y'all, man? Welcome back to the podcast. Here we are again. It's your boy, Hozell, a.k.a. Snoop. Some of y'all know me as Snoop. Some of y'all know me as Hozell. Whatever. You know who I am.
Your boy Armon balling for life. You know the deal.
Well, that's the boy.
You know, these knees act right. We can ball a little bit more.
Man, what's going on with your knees, man? What you talking about?
Bro, they just be hurting all the time. Like, you're in the bed, out the bed, walking, standing, sitting in the car. It's the traffic.
The traffic give you knee-ritis.
Knee-ritis, bro. It's killer. It's killer.
That's my medical professional term right there. Knee-ritis. Yeah, man, it's a thing, man. It's a real serious thing out here right about this time of the season.
It's getting cold. Like something changes when the weather drops. When the weather drops, like my knees just like shrivel up. It's not a good thing.
You gotta stretch them joints out or something, man. You gotta do something, man. Somebody help. Somebody help, man. Somebody let us know in the comments or something what Armon needs to do to get his knees back. He got knee-ritis. This is a terrible diagnosis, man. But we praying for you, brother. We gonna get you right. Don't worry about it.
Appreciate it.
But yeah, how's everything going, man? How was your week?
Man, it was good. This is now week 2 of the lab.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's crazy. You know, we've been talking about this and working on this since the summertime. So it's been nice to kind of see it come together, come to fruition, and get it booming, get it started. How we can help people come to the Lord. And that's exciting news. That's greatly exciting news. That's extraordinary. Some would say.
Absolutely remarkable. That's my boy Dr. Moody. But yeah, man, I think it's been going well. We invite you all to come on out 11 o'clock Sunday mornings right here at St. Stephen Baptist Church to the lab. But yeah, man, so other than that, yeah, man.
Life is good, man. It's wild. School's almost done. That's also something
for now, at least.
For now, for a little breather,
break.
Man, it's wild. Like coming in, like to the semester, I was like, Lord, I'm be dying. I'm be stressing and moving and jumping, and I was like, man, I don't know how we're gonna get through this. But then I was like, man, like we actually like staying afloat, like with work and with school, which is a huge blessing because I was a stressor. Like coming in, I was like, I'm just gonna work, and then Pastor Dockery's like, actually go back to school, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, actually, this was like the best thing I could ever done.
So really, it's Pastor Dockery's fault that your knees are messed up because he put this extra burden on your shoulders, and it went down to your knees. It's all good though, man. You're gonna bounce back. You're gonna bounce back stronger. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be all good, man.
Yeah, but no, it's been good, man. It's been good. Nice to have this semester almost done under my belt, and with great grades, not just good grades, but great grades.
Okay, doing big things, man. That's
encouraging.
I mean, it is Armon, by the way. I mean, like, come on, what'd you expect?
How about
Armon starts with A, right? So you know what I'm saying? You're gonna get an A,
How about you, big dog?
I'm trying to, get on out of that thing, man. Got one more semester left after this. Yeah, man, learned a lot of cool things, met some cool people, talked to some cool folks, taking different classes that are beneficial, whether, I agree with everything that's happening or not, or like, I'll be like, wait a minute, I don't know about that part, you know what I'm saying? Like, that ain't what...
But you send them back with stuff that they need to know, too.
You got to know. So you got to get your information from multiple sources. Like, I'm not just taking their word for it. I know better than that. Come on, give me a break. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be well-read in any subject. So it's like, whether you agree with the information or not, which is a big problem that people have these days, like, they immediately reject information they don't agree with. But if you understand the perspectives, you can at least have a reasonable conversation about it. And you can have a fruitful conversation and maybe even persuade that person to your way of thinking if that's your goal or your intention. So, that's one of the main reasons. And then to educate myself, because I know that, people have a way of selectively writing books. And so, I'm selectively reading books so I can get what I'm trying to get out the deal. So, whatever. Move right along. Yeah, man, let's talk about the word evangelical today, man, because, I hear this word evangelical while we talking about, the way that things are learned, the way that things are taught, the way that things are applied. The question about what is evangelical, because it sounds like it's not such a bad thing, and then you hear the word used and people be like, nah, and then it's like, it's a lot of different layers to it. So like, yeah, I mean, like, what do you think about that word?
Yeah, I think at its core, it's not a bad thing. At its core, it's coming from the Greek word evangelion.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Which
let's
is,
know something.
it's a word used in the Greek New Testament that describes the word, like the phrase "good news."
Mm-hmm.
You know, talking about the coming of Christ, and his desire and willingness to die for us. In doing so, rising again in all power in his hands. And so, with that being said, it has a high view of the Bible. It's the ultimate authority. It's the final authority. Yeah, and it's walking in faith with Jesus ultimately. That at its core is what it's trying to get at. Now, obviously, as we'll kind of get into a little bit, people have different views on that and have used that to pull people politically, in different directions. So, but we'll get into that a little bit later. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, all right, so like, a lot of what you said, like, me, I look it up. I want to see what somebody else says. I'll go off of that because what do I know? I'm just a guy. So like, one definition it says here, this is the kids definition from Merriam-Webster. And it's the second definition. It says, stressing salvation by faith in Jesus, the authority of the Bible, and the importance of preaching. So I know you mentioned like, faith in Jesus, of course, like Christians, that's immediate. And then the authority of the Bible, okay, like I'm sure like most
can get
right.
on board with
That seems reasonable.
Right.
And then you get to the importance of preaching. Like, did you mention that as well?
I did not. But
so I mean, like, what's your view on that? You think that's important? Like, is that a evangelical like staple as well?
I think it's definitely a core piece. It's a core piece because that's how we receive the word. That's how we, interact with God in another way outside of prayer, outside of singing, but hearing the word from a faithful pastor, and then ultimately going and living that out, seeing God's kingdom expanded. And so, in the context of a local church, that's another key piece. Can't just be, just going and roaming around and screaming your head off.
Okay.
No context for that. So it needs to be in the context of a local church, I would say.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's an important piece to it.
Okay. Yeah, faith comes through hearing. I'm sure that's in the Bible. So I can understand like where preaching is like a big piece as well. Like I'm looking like, okay,
checking by
Jesus, that's cool. Bible, I ain't got no problem with that.
Resurrection, yeah.
Preaching, it's got its place. I can see that.
So
like where's
the problem?
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And so like, we have this other understanding of evangelicalism where it's like there's like a racial component attached to it, a political component attached to it, sometimes even an extremist aspect, right?
For sure.
Why? Like, are you an extremist? But YouTube, don't hit us with this, but we just asking some questions. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I follow the Lord, I love Jesus. If that's extreme, then I guess.
Right. So I'm like, these are the questions that I'm asking. You know what I'm saying? And I know the answer, but I'm just saying at the same time, it's like, this is crazy.
How do we get off the road?
Right. And I mean, like, is it proper even like for people to still claim to be a Christian or an evangelical Christian as well? You know what I'm saying? Like, because, even, I mean, like, we can go down the rabbit hole of, is it cool to be called a Christian? And people were called this at this time and that at that time. And, and they were also called Christians. So, I mean, like, whatever you want to call yourself, if you following Christ, that's what I'm talking about,
that's
right?
the lane we in.
So, I mean, then we get these other breakdowns. Are you Reformed? Are you a Calvinist? Are you a hyper-Calvinist? Are you a Arminian? Right. And so, like, you start getting all these. Half these folks, if you ask them, they don't know. But when you start talking to them, if you really care about all that stuff, you be like, oh, he's a ultra hyper sensitive, over the top Calvinist, Arminified. You like, what are you even talking about, bro? You know what I'm saying? And then you start getting in these different separations, and then you have evangelical, which is like certain groups, right? You got, the Baptists and the Methodists and certain Pentecostals and things like that, who was saying like, okay, we all believe in these core things, right? The Jesus and this, that, and the other. But then, like, yeah, the Catholics, they believe in Jesus. They believe in the Bible. So it's like, where's all this evangelical stuff, man? Okay, then we talking about all this, like free fall to hell. It starts getting crazy.
Exactly, you're getting lost in the weeds. Like because I remember when I first like heard the term for the first time, like, I was in one of my theology courses, and I was like, what is that? I was like, I hadn't heard the term before. I was like, I'm a Christian, I'm a Baptist, evangelical? Question mark.
Yeah, like what is that?
I don't know what that is. And I was like, am I out of bounds? Am I in bounds? Like, wasn't really sure. And so like, over time as I like went through the program at Cal Baptist, I was like, okay, like I'm starting to see like what this means, but I'm like, again, like what is the nuance?
Mm-hmm.
What is the actual difference between calling myself a Christian, a Bible believing Christian, and calling myself an evangelical or an evangelical Christian? And like as like I was kind of wrestling with that, I was like noticing like even just in like public spaces outside of the program, like that's not something people really vibe with.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're like, oh, you're an evangelical, so that assumes not just what the list we just gave, that assumes you are politically conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, whoa, that's not necessarily where I land.
Right. See,
not on everything. So It's like, it was like, okay, like when I'm communicating to people are like, okay, like what's your faith background? I'm like, well, I'm a Christian. Even with saying I'm a Baptist too, there's Southern Baptist.
Start putting extra pieces with it.
You start putting extra stuff on it, and people,
don't put that second part in front, then that's
people are you add that to the front, and like so many different assumptions come up that people have about you before you've even had a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, at least, I think it's warranted to explain to people, hey, I'm a Christian, and then give them what I believe about following Christ, and keep it that simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Kiss it. Keep it simple.
Right.
So that way people aren't getting lost in the weeds. And if you want to have deeper conversations beyond that, that maybe lead to more political conversations, let's have that. But for you to just completely, cancel or dismiss me because of a word association that's now been considered, focused on conservatism, I think I'm shooting myself in the foot as far as keeping the gospel central, which should always be our focus. That should always be our goal when having conversations with people, especially those who don't know Christ.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, like you even hit a piece about, conservatism and like what is conservatism? I mean, that's a lot of different layers in and of itself, right? Because it's like, what is conservative and what is moderate? It wasn't what it was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It wasn't what it was 100 years ago.
Right.
It wasn't what it was 200 years ago. The country's been around that long, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like when you look at the history of these words and the way that they've changed over the course of time, you don't have what you had at first.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like even with the word evangelical, like I don't, I can't say how they felt when they started the word or what their intentions were when they said this is a word that we're going to use to, say this is who we are, because I wasn't there, you feel me?
Right.
But at the same time, what it means today is negative, right? For the most part. Like when somebody, like, okay, like I can say like, when you look into history, say around the 1950s, a lot of Americans will say, oh man, that was the glory days. Like that was so fun, man. We had our Chevys and kids could play outside and you could take 5 cents to buy a whole bag worth of candy and chips and soda, and you could catch the bus for a penny. And yeah, okay. Somebody was sitting in the back of the bus though by force, right? Somebody was getting lynched and all this other stuff. So it wasn't them glory days for everybody. But at the same time, when you're talking about evangelical, a person would say like at that time when evangelicalism was kind of like at its height, right? Billy Graham and all these other guys. You're projecting him as a moral authority, or you're projecting him as a hero. This dude hanging out with all the presidents. This is a man of authority. And then he's saying, this is how you should live. This is what you should do. Well, if you want to be a man of authority like him, you follow his way. But truthfully, you should be following Christ over all of that, right?
Yep.
But I mean, what happens is we get lost in the people sometimes, and that goes for things outside of this conversation as well. But I mean, like even with the evangelical conversation, you have those groups like the moral majority,
Right.
you know, who's saying like, this is how Christians should live. We're people who are in authority. We're people who are projected as moral people. And so if we're saying you should do this, you should do this. And it gets into everybody's radio station, gets into everybody's TV station, gets into everybody's ears. And they started taking on these ideologies that aren't necessarily biblical, but are more political or more socially based.
Yep.
But the irony of it is that the people who take on these mindsets that, you know, the government needs to be affected, we should have prayer in school, we should be doing this thing. And not to say that we shouldn't, that's a different conversation. But what I'm saying is a lot of the people who hold these positions are the same people who say that we shouldn't use the Bible to solve social issues. And so it's like, you can't say, let's use the Bible to control the schools, let's use the Bible to control the government. And then when it's time for you to do something that you're supposed to be doing, that the Bible actually says, you don't want to have nothing to do with it.
Got crickets.
I don't know. Am I on the evangelical thing still?
No, that's.
So I'm just throwing that out there, man.
Nah,
Let me have some coffee,
though.
man.
That's
I
real.
need to wake up.
Yeah, get a little coffee. Get a little coffee. No, that's real though. I mean, you know, we constantly, you know, overlook, especially of course the last couple of years, like having conversations constantly about with fellow believers and people, you know, we have connections to, united under Christ with, you know, are saying, you know, well, we'll leave it alone, or that's not my spot, or, you know,
just preach the gospel.
Just preach the gospel. Goodness gracious alive. Like, well, what does that actually mean though? Like when they slide that out there, like, what does that actually mean?
Like it depends.
When you hear that, like when someone tells you you have a conversation, you know, about social issues that are going on and how, you know, we can as believers effectively, individually and corporately work to see, you know, God's kingdom expanded and him glorified, and they just say, well, just preach the gospel. What does that mean to you?
But that's the complex of evangelicalism, right? Is that evangelicalism often is selective in its outrage, right? And I mean, this happens in other aspects too. Let's not just say that. But we're talking about evangelicalism right now, so let's stick to the subject.
So what are we talking about right now?
Right. What are we talking about right now? But like evangelicalism. So it's like, you know, when you get into like the different layers of, you know, what does it mean to just preach the gospel? What does it mean to the Bible doesn't have anything? The Bible got everything. I thought the Bible was supposed to be like the blueprint for how you're supposed to live your life. It says love thy neighbor. The neighbor. So that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Then you start talking about what? You talking about the dude next door, or you talking about my mama? Or you talking about the person at my church? Because that's my neighbor. You know what I'm saying? I'm a citizen of the kingdom. Hold on, player. You know what I'm saying? But like, you know, we want to start doing that. But that's how we got here in the first place. That's how we got to what is it? Now you got all kind of people like, I'm an evangelical, but not that kind. You know what I mean? So yeah, so like that's what I'm saying. When you interject yourself into certain places, you expose yourself in terms of having to do it in the other place as well. So you can't say I can't do it now and then try to do it later, and then you know, this is not beneficial to me personally.
Right.
This may be harmful to me in the way that I'm living right now. I don't want to have nothing to do with it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I'd rather take care of somebody else somewhere where I can affect them off site than deal with some of the repercussions that are taking place close to me. And so that's one of the critiques of evangelical mindsets, is that they're too evangelical sometimes, right?
Right.
Where they want to go help somebody that really has no connection to them instead of helping the people that they really have a connection to. You know what I mean? The ones, like you said, we united in Christ. But not just that. You know what I'm saying? I actually am your neighbor.
Right.
Like we live within the same 15, 20-minute drive. You know what I'm saying? Like I used to press CBU with, you know, certain people there. Not everybody, but just like in general. You know what I mean? And I would say, you know, like CBU is right off the 91. That's the same freeway you could take to Compton and go help somebody right there. But, you know, and we rightly celebrate people going out on mission trips to other places in the world, but they not aware of the people that need help on the same freeway right down the, you know what I mean?
Right.
Literally down the road. And so it's like, we got to be aware also. That's what the good news is about, right? Is sharing with the people that you got right there with you. Like
Right.
Paul was going to the synagogues, you know what I'm saying? And then he'll go talk to the other people, but he hollered at his own people first.
Right.
I'm just throwing that out there, man. It sounds evangelical to me.
Hey, no, that's real. Here's a question. If you had somebody who said, you know what, like, I'm evangelical and, you know, these are my views, and they do align more conservatively, like, how would you try to respond to them? How would you try to encourage them to maybe have a more open perspective in how they can conduct themselves, have conversations with people, and like we're talking about, trying to love people, you know, better.
A lot of the understanding that people have is based on stereotypes and falsehood, especially when it comes to conservative. Often, some of the conservative views of other people that are not white. Let's just, you know, we ain't trying to be crazy, but let's just talk about it, because that's part of the evangelical problem, right? Is race.
Yep.
And so, the thing is that, like, if I'm saying that all these guys, all these, you know, these white preachers are God's men, God's chosen men. And then, you know, evangelical mindsets often portray black preachers of the same influence and prestige within their own communities as less educated, less qualified. And so it's like, you have a guy like, and I'm just saying, for example, like a guy like Tony Evans, right? Who's well known, right? We know who Tony Evans is. His family's in the game and everything, right? At the same time, when you look into his audience, you still see black folks there.
Yeah.
And when you see John MacArthur, you look into his audience, you see mostly like white people there. You know what I'm saying? So there's still something, right? Because you can play both of them on the same station, and they do.
Yep.
They play their sermons on the same station. But when you look in their churches, you don't see the same people that you're affecting with those airwaves, right?
Right.
And so, like, there got to be something that's going on, and that's what I'm saying. It goes back to the mindset of sometimes people who say this man's not educated enough. He's not as astute as John MacArthur or John Piper or some of these others, right? Where I can take in his teaching with the same kind of confidence, and that's based on stereotypes of black people not being able to learn, black people not really connecting to God in meaningful ways. Mostly just flapping around and playing and rolling on the ground, and that's all that we good for, is kind of just like still stuck in some kind of a narrow-minded and non-educated religion. When in fact, you want to start talking about facts, you know what I'm saying? It was Africans that perpetuated Christianity.
One more time?
African people. You know what I mean? Black folks. If you really want to get real technical, it was black folks, you know what I mean, who were worshiping Christ 1,000 years before the slave trade. It was black folks who were worshiping Christ way before the King James Bible was ever translated into English. They got a Bible in Ethiopia that's 800 years older than the King James Bible in their language. I don't know, man. I'm just talking about facts right now. So, you know, when we look at what does it mean to be evangelical, what we really need to be trying to do is separate the myth from the truth, and the true intent from what has become the intent. You know what I'm saying? And then we can find out. But some people will even ask, is it a term worth fighting for, especially for black people who have been harmed by people who kind of stick to those kind of trains. And then to your original question, I guess, why we there, right? Way over here, right? How do you help people to understand? They got to understand that they don't know it all, right? And so there's some stories that you have not heard. There's some truth that you don't know. There's some things that are taking place that you're unaware of because they're not in those books. That's part of what I'm talking about. They're not going to put that in there because it's like, get that out the way. Let's just talk about something else. I've read through Christian history textbooks that have articles on Marxism and Karl Marx and don't have no articles on the Apostle Mark. What are we talking about?
What are we doing? That's wild.
What are we introduction to Christianity.
How you even get there?
How do you introduce somebody to Christianity without introducing them to Mark? But you got Karl Marx in the book. What are our priorities?
Yeah,
That's really what we're
focus?
talking about right
What's
now.
The focus?
That's the question of evangelicalism. What are the priorities of evangelical thought? That's when we get down to the bottom of it, and we can figure out if there is such a thing as evangelicalism, or if this is just a byword for a political movement.
And that's what I was just thinking about. I'm like, was the original goal to have Christ be the focus and him crucified, or has it and always been, a cover, a mask, like you said, for political gain?
Right.
And if that was the case, which is, what we run into a lot right now, I'm not going to refer myself as that.
Right.
If it's going to hurt my ability to minister to somebody. Mm-hmm. And that's what needs to be the focus. That I'm going to continue to say that needs to be the point. If it's going to hinder your ability to share the gospel with someone, if it's going to hinder your ability to have a good witness to them, I personally am going to stay away from it. And again, I'm going to go back to, if someone asks me, what are my beliefs? I'm going to run that down for them.
Right. Right. Let them judge from that.
And let them judge for themselves. I feel like that's low-key, trying to do a power move, and that's what it's become now is, this is who I am. Like I said, I'm the moral majority. I'm, knowing it all. I have the final say, so I know what's best. And completely, whether people know it or not, are dismissing the humanity and the autonomy and, the free will that people have as well, to decide for themselves.
Well, I mean, like, no shade to the SBC, but like, even with the title of Southern Baptist, like, that's a hindrance as well sometimes, you know what I'm saying? Especially coming from a black dude, because it's like when you tell them Southern Baptist, they're like, hold on, bro, what you doing? It's like, hold on, like, calm down, bro. Relax, you feel me? Yeah. You tripping, you know what I'm saying? Don't ever get it twisted, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, it's like, I understand what you're saying, you know what I'm saying? But don't let the smooth taste fool you, though.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But I get it.
Right.
Because it's crazy. It's like a weird predicament where it's like, there's a lot of good stuff happening here. Yeah, there's a lot of positive knowledge, positive whatever, you know what I mean? And the resources, blah, 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 whatever. But then it's like, how do we rectify that with some of the realities of the stuff that's actually still happening? Like, how do we rectify that with what, like the attitudes, like what you're talking about? And then the positions that these attitudes are in that affect the ability to change them, right? And so, like, it's a labor of love, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, it don't come for free. Trust, like, you know the deal, like, you know what's happening.
It's a sacrifice, and it's, as you said, what we, been trying to do last 3, 4, 5 years of just like, really trying to like ask questions. As simple as that, just asking questions of like, why do you believe this?
Yeah, how did you
come to that conclusion? How do you come to that conclusion in light of, what Christ has done and what his work has meant? What are the ramifications
right
of what he's done for us? And how you interact with other believers and interact with those who don't know Christ. Like, those are questions, we've been working hard to answer and been asking, been working hard to provide context, for people who were Bible-believing Christians, Baptist Christians, Black Baptist Christians who were living and walking faithfully amid being persecuted by people who said they were Christians.
Right. So, yes, y'all know the history. I could go into it. I know it, you know what I'm saying? I could tell it real good, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, that's the question. It's like, how do you justify association with somebody who has hurt you and then doesn't have any remorse about it? You know what I mean? It's different when it's like, hey, man, I was wrong. Let's fix this. How can we make this right? Then when you say this is how we make it right, then they say, okay, let's do that. You know what I'm saying? Not like, nah. You asking for too much, little man.
Apology without action. It's not true repentance.
You got to do something about that. Exactly.
It's not true repentance, which is, last I checked, that's what we need to have Christ, have a relationship with Christ, is repentance. At the same time, that's what you need to do to reconcile and reconcile and whatever other term you want to use to make right.
Something style.
Make right wrongs. And so, I think that's something we gotta continue to kind of press on is like, we appreciate the apology, but how are you trying to make this correct? How are you trying to right this wrong?
Mm-hmm.
How are you trying to make sure this is not repeated?
The guarantees of non-repetition. That's what, you gotta have them. Man, I ain't going there with y'all today. But look, I mean, even your approach itself is an evangelical approach because it's like it's for the better of the person that's hearing it than it is for me to say, I'm standing on this hill and I'm willing to die on it. And I think that's the problem that a lot of people who have the evangelical tradition that they follow, they get caught up in the us versus them syndrome, as opposed to the evangelical side of it, which is, let me have the compassion of Christ. Let me, see what these people need. How can I meet your needs? How can I address you with respect, right, even in your fallen state, or what I even perceive to be your fallen state? Right. Because a lot of these people ain't even falling. They just falling in somebody else's mind. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, if we're not doing it a certain kind of way, does that mean that it's wrong? If we're not doing it a certain kind of way, does that mean that it's unholy? Anyway, we could talk about that on a different podcast.
I think
because I'm finna go somewhere.
I think a good way to kind of sum it up, on how we should conduct ourselves, people who, in terms of the actual definition, are evangelical. I think walking in humility and sharing that with those who also call themselves evangelical is where we need to land. And that's how we can kind of press forward.
Right. I mean, but evangelical, like, even if a kid can understand it, right? The first definition that came from that same definition I read earlier of relating to or being in agreement with the Christian gospel, especially as given in the four gospels, the one that testify about Christ. 100%. So that's what we're supposed to be doing, of relating to or being in agreement with the Christian gospel, especially as given in those that talk about Jesus Christ. And then also stressing salvation by faith in Jesus, the authority of the Bible to tell us how to live and what he did, right? And how we need to be doing the same thing. Yeah. And why because it go back all the way back to the beginning. Y'all can read it and we'll read it with y'all. And the importance of preaching. The preaching. That's cool too. You know what I'm saying? But we got to be, like, it's simple. If Miriam know it, how the church folks don't know it? This ain't the Bible. This is a dictionary, man. Give me a break. Come on, it's the kids' definition. Give me a break. Come on, let's get it together, folks. Come on, let's get it right. You know what I'm saying? It's so easy a kid can understand it. What are we doing? What are we talking about?
We talking about Christ?
I don't know what we talking about. You know what I'm saying? We talking about evangelical. We talking about practice. What we talking about?
Not the game, but practice. No, man. Yeah, we wanted to share a little bit on, like, what are the realities of, like, this belief and this focus. Kind of obviously kind of where we're at on kind of addressing that, how we respond when people ask us about that. But then also, again, keeping it focused on what it needs to be focused on, the good news of Christ. That's where it needs to land. If you got nothing else, the good news of Christ is where we need to be focused and what needs to be presented and what needs to be reflected. And what we say, think, and what we do.
You know what? I think you're the spokesperson for that. But while we talking about spokespeople, why don't we just go ahead, man? Look, you see this in the background? Look. California Miramar University. Give a shout out to California Miramar University, even though I'm representing CBU. There's some good folks, man. So, you know what I'm saying? Check them out, man. They let us use the sign, and we appreciate that. So, shout out to CMU, who's hanging out here on the campus with us.
And if y'all got questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, feelings, hit us up at REAP1720@gmail.com. And that one more time. REAP, R-E-A-P 1720 @gmail.com.
Yeah, man. So, I'm glad you spelled that, you know what I'm saying? Because they might have thought you had said feet.
Watch the feet, son.
Feet 1720. What is that supposed to mean? I don't understand it. The feet of Jesus? What are they talking about? But yeah, man. Other than that, I think we're good here, man. So
I think we're solid.
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good, man. Y'all have a good week.
God bless.
Good day.
Godspeed. Reaper out, baby.
Deuces.